Music has always been a way for many to escape, but for many it has been hard rock and metal from its origins, beginning in the 60s and 70s with the Beatles, Jimi Hendrix, and so many others. As time has passed, there have been many elements of the music scene that have evolved, but it is this inspiration of two individuals who met by accident during the days of MySpace that this story is about. This new friendship led to the inception of what was once only an online magazine to what it is today using video. Follow the story of one fan of hard rock bands like Kiss and the other who enjoys all the styles of heavy metal ranging from Dio to black metal. This is the story of the development of Chaotic Riffs Magazine and all the spin-off episodes that have been created over the years, keeping all materials as raw and unedited as possible. This is truly a story you do not want to miss from the two founders of Chaotic Riffs Magazine. So the journey begins with two individuals meeting unexpectedly in a social media platform that was actually budding at the time. This is the story as they remember it being told. We've been doing this for quite some time now. I call him J-Rock Houston, but it's kind of a nickname I gave him. And we found each other on MySpace probably 15 years ago, 16 years ago. As we're thinking about this process of going through everything, it kind of brings back a lot of memories of different things we went through to get to where we are today. And we're always trying to do more and more and more. I was actually doing some research for the process of putting together a CD to raise money for veterans. And I was kind of scouring all through MySpace at a time. I think it was Looking Skyward and some of these other bands that were out there. And I had some friends that donated some songs. And I kind of ran across him as I was doing my homework for that. That's how I really found Jason. But that entire process led to where we are today. And I think that the interview process that we did worked for at the time. The technology, it was kind of where we were at. We were actually kind of cutting edge what we were doing, I think, with sending out questions and getting them back and then putting them into a PDF that was available to everybody to be able to see for free, which is what we've always done. We've always done this for free. We've never made a penny doing this. It's not what this whole process has been about. It's been more about getting the word out there. And I think Jason would agree about that.
So me and Lethal X, we met on MySpace. Basically, I had been doing email type interviews where I'd been reaching out to musicians and bands, and I would send them questions through the email. And sometimes they'd have back to me in a day. Sometimes it'd take a week or two, just kind of pinned it on their schedule if they were out on the road. Once I got it, I would put the interview together. I'd post it on MySpace. And Lethal X reached out to me, said, I really like a lot of your interviews you've been posting. You asked some really good questions. I'm thinking about putting together an online magazine. Would you be interested in helping me to create that? And to be honest, I had no idea what he was really talking about. I thought, am I interested? You bet I'm interested.
Following their endeavors with the Chaotic Riffs magazine, two individuals decided to try something a little different now that technology had changed. They attempted to do the audio versions and add graphics to those, and that gained traction for many of the people because now they could hear the voices of what was being said and also see some graphics at the same time. And this was placed into the social media environment of YouTube and did quite well for some time. Talk a little bit about the entire process we did until we did 35 issues, actually. And they were like anywhere from, 2 months to 3 months apart. And it was a process that we had to do. And it was this entire, I guess, learning curve that we had at the time, because technology at this time had not progressed too much further than email. Video was something that was completely new, so there wasn't anything happening except by phone call. So phone call, it was how we did a lot of it. And I remember that at one point you were actually transcribing everything from your recorded messages. Yeah. So you want to talk about that a little bit, Jason?
Yeah, sure. So, typically what we do is about each issue would have about 5 or 6 interviews, but each interview would take time to do because, first of all, I'd have to send out the questions to musician or whoever was doing the interview. And then depending on if they were out on tour or what their schedule was, I have to wait to get the answers back. And then so once you get the answers back, it's like, okay. And at the time, I didn't even have a digital recorder. I had like a little, remember the mini tape recorders, and so I would have to at that point, listen as best I could and transcribe interviews from a little micro cassette recorder. And at first I was trying to get it word for word, but then it got to a point where, okay, you don't need to get word for word. You don't need all the ands and the is, but it's got to make sense. And I wanted to do my best to keep it in their words, so you don't want to alter a person's words, because people are reading what these musicians have to say. And so that would, because I was not the fastest typist either, so that would take me 1 to 2 days just to get it all transcribed. And then I type it on the computer and I'd send it in an email form to you, and then you would do your magic.
And then I would take all the transcriptions that he gave me in the email form. I'd have to take that, put it into a program I was using at the time, which InDesign was sort of kind of new, and I was experimenting with that. And then there was some other programs out there that I was experimenting with, but I ended up using InDesign for several of those over the years. But it was a process to take all that text, and not only was it just a matter of putting the text in and formatting all that so it fit in a column format and page, much like what a publisher would have done anyway in a traditional magazine, but then I had to also make all the graphics for the cover, and I had to actually take the stuff inside and make the graphics for that and try to make it something other than just a plain white background. So I spent probably, per band, let's say there was 5 or 6, plus we had some other pages in there and we had the cover, I probably spent probably 20 to 30 hours just doing the graphics for that stuff over a period of time. And so we had a lot of people asking, so when are you going to put the next issue out? And it's because it took so much time, and we were also working other jobs at the time, still are, and that process required us to have to do it whenever we had time to squeeze everything in. So it took us anywhere from 2 to 3 months on average to put a magazine out. And so it was a real challenge, I believe. And again, technology and computer power and all those things just didn't exist at the time that we have now.
Yeah, and it was a real learning process, because I also remember, as far as transcribing stuff, like you said, email wasn't that advanced. You were only allowed to fit so much in an email, and that's another way we would communicate. Like I would send the stuff to you through email. And another thing is, like you said, the graphics were a big part of what we were doing, the presentation. And so I even remember, people are going to laugh when they hear this, but again, I'm not a real computer tech type of guy. I can do basic stuff on the computer. I can get on the internet. I can do searches for stuff. I can even do word processing, but that's about as far as I go. And so I even remember at the time not knowing anything about copy and paste. And so again, when I talk about transcribing, I mean, I would sit there and listen to that tape recorder, and I would write down with a pen, word for word, until it got to the point where, okay, it's complete now. I can put it in email form and send it off to you. And I'll never forget when somebody showed me how to copy and paste. My God, I've been wasting all this time. It's so easy.
Yeah, and it's things that we took for granted, because we're talking about the early 2000s, 2005 to 2010. Technology just didn't really exist. I mean, we just got away from doing typewriters, in the late 90s, and got to word processors started coming out that were actually becoming affordable. So typing it was not a skill that you necessarily knew unless you took it in high school, which I happened to take. Didn't take it seriously, but I did it. Doesn't even exist anymore in schools. So it's still a skill that you see everybody doing, the one finger typist thing that is really popular. And so again, it takes a while to put that stuff together. And it's that entire process that we were embarking on at the time that made this kind of new at the time. It was like, okay, we're delivering these by internet on a website that people can go and download to their computers, and they can view it and do all the things that they wanted to. We even experimented with making it a web page in itself for a couple issues. Yeah. That turned out to be a nightmare, because if one thing was wrong with a link for whatever reason, then people couldn't access stuff. So we tried doing what we could at the time. And I think that when we got to the point of doing the 35 issues, we had kind of reached our max as far as what we could accomplish with what we were doing. And then we ended up transitioning into something completely different from that. I think it was really kind of a learning curve for us. It was more about us making connections with our other individuals that were out there. Then there were all the musicians and all the talent that was there that we wouldn't be able to have done any of this with if they hadn't been willing to work with us at the time.
Yeah, and one thing I've always kind of realized in regards to that is most people have a story to tell, and if you give them an opportunity to tell their story, most people are willing to. And so that's why we've had a lot of the same musicians and bands continue to promote what they're doing. But along the way, we met some really amazing, one of the first bands, in fact, I think they're featured in the very first issue, Holes and Hearts, where these two twin brothers, one had a very serious heart condition, had to have a serious heart operation. He since, well, actually, that's what reason the band is called Holes and Hearts, because one of them literally had a hole in his heart, and luckily, they're both all grown up now, and they're still doing it to this day. And it's been several years, but they've actually been featured on our site.
We've seen a lot of bands that really, they go, let's face it. So in the industry of artists and bands, there's a lot of people who are in and out of different bands and stuff. So there are certain individuals that we've followed that have gone from one band to another band to another band. David Ellefson from Megadeth, he had his own band for a little while. He had his own record label for a while. He's had his own things, and we interviewed him way back early on when all this stuff was going on at the time. And then we had Frankie Banali, and then Jeff Tate from Queensryche after he broke off with them and started his own stuff. But we've had a lot of people over there. Ronnie Monroe did some Trans-Siberian Orchestra stuff. He's also had a Metal Church and all these different things out there. And it's really kind of interesting that if people would take the time and actually go back and watch almost 1,000 videos that we now have, they would actually see a lot of the same people, but now with a totally different story, like what you're talking about, communicating a different story, which is, at this particular moment in time, which is really kind of what we're about. I think
sure. Yeah, and another thing I got to say, again, going back to the early 2000s when this first started, not everybody had a podcast. I mean, stuff like that was starting to pop up. In fact, when we're still considered like a print website. They had stuff like melodicrock.com and all these other sites. Some of these sites aren't even around anymore, but I would go on and kind of look at what they were doing, and not to copycat or anything, because I definitely think we got our own vibe going, and that's something I got to compliment you on, because you're in charge of all the graphics and the technical stuff, and we've always kind of had our own look, our own kind of vibe going, and that's something I've always been extremely proud of.
The spin-off of Under the Influence was created as a means for individuals who had tribute bands to also get some popularity and also get some recognition, because these bands were just as talented as the originals in many cases, but didn't always have an outlet for that. So the plan was to have these individuals present their stories.
One such cat I will never forget, Jason Lee Beckwith, the drummer and founding member of the LA-based Kiss tribute band, Kissed Alive. I've done many interviews with Jason over the year. And me and him always joke about, hey, the two Jasons. Well, I will tell you, me and him could talk hours and hours just about our mutual love and respect for Kiss. And here's a guy that actually, he plays in a Kiss tribute band. He's the drummer. Sometimes he sings Beth in concert and some other Peter Criss tunes. So the guy's got the ability to sing lead. He's a great drummer. And we've talked with Jason many, many times. I've interviewed him many times over the years. So in doing the Under the Influence interviews, he's one of the guys that I became really good friends with. And we've done other interviews where like he told me, hey, I'm a real big Van Halen fan. I dig Van Halen. So he told me his favorite Van Halen album was, of all things, you can believe it, 1984. We had an interview with for almost an hour talking about the 1984 album by Van Halen. The privilege to interview Swan Montgomery, who is from the premier Led Zeppelin tribute out here in Los Angeles. Of course, I'm talking about the band Led Zeppelin. Now, let me tell you about Led Zeppelin. Well, Swan Montgomery, amazingly enough, is not even Led Zeppelin's original singer, but he's been playing with the band, I believe, for the last 30 years. And he's a great singer. He looks and he sounds just like Robert Plant. I mean, close your eyes and you'd swear it was Robert Plant singing in the room. He's got the look, he's got the vibe of Robert Plant. And so he's not only is he great at what he does, but I'll tell you, he told me a great story. When Led Zeppelin did the reunion show in London a number of years ago with Jason Bonham, Led Zeppelin, Swan told me, was actually, they were Jimmy Page's invited guest. This tribute band to Led Zeppelin from Los Angeles got invited by Jimmy Page, of all people, to the reunion show. They were the backstage guest of Led Zeppelin because Jimmy Page, of all people, he tipped his hat to Led Zeppelin and he told them, hey, you guys are pretty much like the next best thing to Led Zeppelin. You're so great at what you do. You're going to be our invited guest at this reunion show. Another cat I've encountered during the Under Influence project was Vince Thrill, who played the role of Vince Neil in an Arizona-based Motley Crue tribute band called Public Enemy Number One. I always loved the Motley Crue song Public Enemy Number One. It was I just thought it was a very underrated song. I always loved it from the first when I heard it. So finally, I come across this band called Public Enemy Number One. I reach out to the lead singer, and I've interviewed Vince also many times over the years. I've interviewed him many times about playing with his Motley Crue tribute band, how the band got together, why he started paying tribute to Motley Crue. Obviously, Motley Crue, the band that he grew up on it, but he really looked and sounded like Vince Neil, and he's another guy that I became very tight friends with, and I've interviewed him many times over the years, and that's why I really had fun doing these tribute interviews. People think, oh, these are failed musicians, they're playing other people's music, but believe me, there's much more to it than that.
In January 2023, Chaotic Riffs Magazine transitioned into Chaotic Riffs TV, which was similar to the older videos of Chaotic Riffs Magazine, but the graphics improved, and many of the guests interviewed were part of a much more professional circuit. However, it is important to underscore that we did interview many mainstream band members, such as Juan Crosier from Rat, as well as many others. One of the very first bands we interviewed was Corners of Sanctuary's guitarist Mick Michaels, and since that time we have interviewed members from other bands like Images of Eden, Vinnie Vincent, Carl Kennedy, Blue Oyster Cult, and Vainglory, to mention just a few. However, during the Chaotic Riffs TV time, we interviewed Tom Collier, the guitarist from Held Hostage, who is now part of a brand new spin-off show, the This Is Metal Show with Tom Collier, who is also the president of the Fire Rock Music Group Distribution Company. It is important to point out that this show initially started out with Joe Lawson, but was more like a discussion between J. Rock Houston and Joe Lawson about things happening in the music world. The This Is Metal Show with Tom Collier is probably our most popular show to date. These shows often interview several members at a time, from bands like Atomic Kings, Nick Z. Marino of the band NZM, Blacklight District, The Rods, drummer Carmine Appice, David Schenkel, Riley's L.A. Guns, actress Kathy Rankin, Mark Farner of Grand Funk Railroad, original Great White and Guns N' Roses manager Alan Niven, Spider Rockets, the iconic band The Dictators, Helix, Riot Stitch clothing designer Sherry Lou, Babylon AD, Jack Russell's Great White Band, Montrose singer Keith St. John, and Sun Don't Shine guitarist Kenny Hickey and drummer Johnny Kelly, original members of Typo Negative. Please keep in mind, this is just a partial list of bands and their members that we have interviewed for the This Is Metal show to date. We have also premiered music videos, some that were created by our parent company, Vortexual Dreams Production, along with others. In December 2024, a Metal Christmas song music video, Carol of the Bells, was released worldwide by the Metal Hall of Fame founder and owner Pat Gisoldo via the show entitled the Fire Rock Music Group Video Premiere Review Show. During this show, some of the individuals involved in the production of the music video were interviewed and asked questions about the video's creation. So what's next in the transformation of the Chaotic Riffs video show family? There are hopes of taking the shows to the next level and having the This Is Metal show available on popular streaming services. Thank you to those who have supported us over the years with their many contributions to the shows that we have created that are now approaching 1,500 to date, and there are many more being planned currently. Rock on! And thanks for taking the time to watch our documentary about the origins of Chaotic Riffs Magazine.